there was a couple. They were engaged, and they had a child on the way. He had a small business, ran a small business. He was a handyman. He could fix anything. And at one point, the government of their time, they told them they had to move. And they thought it was temporary, short term. So they only took what was necessary. It was quite a journey that they needed to go quite a distance and migrate inside their own country. And so he didn't take very many tools. He certainly couldn't take his whole workshop. And it happened that while they were in this new town, she gave birth to a son. So they couldn't return home right away. And he had to find some work, and they had to find a place to stay. And after a time, they were warned that their baby son was not safe in the country anymore. And so they had to flee. They left everything behind again, but the essentials, and they fled to the neighboring country. So first they were migrants in their own nation, and then they were immigrants in another. And again, they found themselves starting over. They had to find a place to live. He had to start his business over again. And I think this is a common enough tale for migrants, for immigrants. Some within our own community here at St. Mary's of the Visitation, right here in Iowa City. They've come here, and they, I think, hear part of their story in the tale I just told. Fleeing homes for all sorts of reasons: violence, persecution, poverty, famine, so many reasons it would be impossible to name them all. But the tale I just told should be very familiar to you. It's about a particular couple. It's about a couple that you all know. Raise your hand if you recognized part of it. Yeah? You should, because it's the story of the Holy Family. Joseph and Mary were forced to go to Bethlehem because of the Roman census. And Joseph was told by the angel to flee to Egypt to protect the child Jesus. You see, we have a God that knows what poverty is, knows the plight of not having a home, knows the struggle of being displaced. Our two greatest saints, Mary and Joseph, know the terrible reality of not knowing where the next meal was going to be. And I wonder, when I think about St. Joseph, how many times he went without a meal in order that Mary and Jesus were fed. And thank God that the Magi came along when they did and gave those gifts in Bethlehem before their flight to Egypt. I think the gifts probably sustained them for some time, and yet I have no doubt that once in Egypt, Joseph had to find work. He had to buy new tools. He had to set up a new workshop. And it's out of this context, it's out of this lived experience of Jesus that he speaks to us in the gospel today. He is at a Sabbath meal. No doubt a very distinguished guest, maybe the most distinguished guest at that meal. And he instructs everyone gathered there, teaches them an important lesson about humility. He says, take the lowest seat, not the most distinguished one. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. And after these instructions to take the lowest place, then he really hits hard. He says, when you host a dinner, he says this to the host of the dinner that he's at. He says, do not invite those who have the ability to repay you with an invitation back, but invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you. There's no doubt that Jesus understood humility well, and not simply because he was the second person of the Holy Trinity, but because of his lived experience. In his 3-year public ministry, he was an itinerant preacher. And once he started that public ministry, he never had a home. He traveled from place to place. He healed, he taught, he reconciled, performed an occasional miracle, but he never had any wealth, and he could not repay a wealthy person's invitation to dinner with a similarly voluptuous dinner party of his own. The four bishops in Iowa released a pastoral reflection on immigration. It's entitled Pilgrims of Hope. I encourage all of you to read it. It's not a long read. And as I already mentioned, a theme of the readings this weekend is humility. And one part of humility is admitting that we do not have all the answers. Migration, immigration, these are very tough topics, and there's no silver bullet, there's no simple answers to solve it. In Pilgrims of Hope, the bishops say, immigration is not merely a political or economic issue. It is a deeply moral matter that calls for a response rooted in faith, justice, and mercy. Today's responsorial psalm, we said, God, in your goodness, you have made a home for the poor. Catholic social teaching, based on the teachings of Jesus, call us to welcome the stranger, to feed the hungry, to give drink to the thirsty, to clothe the naked. And if you reread chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel, you'll see that these are not optional things. These are foundational things that identify us as Christians. I'm going to read a portion of the Pilgrims of Hope document in which the bishops remind us, at the core of Catholic social teaching is the conviction that every person has a right to live in conditions consistent with his or her human dignity. All persons come from somewhere and seek to live a decent and dignified life where they presently reside. But when their right to exist and other basic rights are threatened or denied to an extent that they decide to exercise their right to migrate, the Church upholds this later right. And when people are unable to provide for their families due to violence, persecution, or extreme poverty, they have a right to seek a better life elsewhere. The bishops continue, at the same time, nations have the right to regulate their borders for the sake of the common good, provided these safeguards are justly enacted with respect for fundamental human rights. The Church does not argue for unrestricted migration, but she does reject policies that are inhumane, arbitrary, or disproportionately punitive. That's the end of that quote. Jesus challenges us today with two lessons of humility. And these lessons of humility align so well with the challenges within the document of the Iowa Bishops' Pilgrims of Hope. They are not easy. And first, we must place ourselves in a lower position instead of a more distinguished one. And second, we must use our resources for those that are most in need. Jesus tells us in chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel that it is him that we welcome, that we feed, that we clothe, not just the stranger, the hungry, or the naked. And so this week, as we consider Jesus' confrontational dinner party at the Pharisees' house, let us also consider the complex issues of migration and immigration. Might we all humble ourselves a little bit by admitting that we do not have all the answers. Today, Jesus challenges all of us in the same way he challenged those at the Sabbath dinner. And I'm convinced that his challenging words come from his lived experience within his own family life with Mary and Joseph. The Holy Family were migrants within their own nation, then immigrants in another. They were strangers that needed new neighbors that would welcome them, new neighbors that would love them. In Pilgrims of Hope, the bishops urge us, the Church's response to immigration must go beyond platitudes. It must take concrete form in the way believers advocate, accompany, and serve others. The treatment of immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers is not a marginal issue, but a gauge of how seriously we take the command to love our neighbor.